Richmond. David, you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, hi everyone. I'm David. I'm a student at VCU, and I've been interning with the office for a couple months now, so good to see everyone again.
Jeff?
I'm Jeff Crawford, work for the Department of Finance for the city, and I'm co-chair of this committee.
Alexis?
Sorry. Hi, I'm Alexis. I'm a law student at University of Richmond, and I'm interning with the Office of Sustainability for the summer.
Great. Thank you. Wendy?
Hi, Wendy Fuster, co-facilitator, Office of Sustainability, Climate Action Coordinator.
And Calvin?
I'm Calvin Chalmers. I am the fleet manager for the city of Richmond.
Thank you. We're glad you're here. Alex?
Hi, I'm Alex. I'm also a law student at the University of Richmond, interning with the office this summer.
Thanks. Angela?
Hi, I'm Angela Fontaine. I am a roundtable member representing the community.
Thank you. Carrie?
Hi, I'm Carrie Rose Pace, the Director of Communications for GRTC.
Thanks. And Jason?
I'm Jason James, engaged citizen, bike advocate, that sort of thing. Professor at University of Mary Washington.
Excellent. Thank you. I do know a couple of others who let me know they would be a little late. I think Diane and Max. So hopefully some others will be dropping in. But thank you for being here. This is an important meeting to start mapping out the impacts of our strategies. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. In the meantime, there was an email yesterday with some links in it. And that had, there's a presentation link to the Google slide deck. And if you are a city staff and you can't access the chat feature in Zoom, this is a way for you to be interactive with us. So on the first slide of that slide deck is a page called links. And that's where you can you can click on the links and access the different documents. And then the second slide is for Q&A. So if you can't access the chat and you want to post a question or post a response, this is a good place to do that. So we'll be capturing feedback and input and questions and comments there and sharing resources. So why don't we go ahead and jump right in. So this is the Impacts and Indicators meeting for the Transportation and Mobility Working Group of RVAgreen2050. We are going to go over the agenda and objectives and the ground rules. Wendy, would you like to present that?
Sure. Okay, so for our agenda today, we'll start off by settling in. We did the introductions and we'll go over the ground rules. We're going to review the revised strategies from our activity at our last working group meeting. We're going to go over the concept of impact mapping, and then our activity today will be to make some impact maps for our prioritized strategies, and then we'll do our wrap up and next steps at the end of that. So the objectives for today are to identify the potential impacts of the prioritized strategies that we've ended up with after our last meeting. So we want to try and answer the question, what are we trying to impact and what does success look like for each of those strategies, and what is our understanding of what we can achieve with those. And then the ground rules, again, are to be respectful, be present, participate, but don't dominate, be additive, not repetitive, try and get to consensus, be open to new ideas, bring solutions to problems, separate people from problems, speak from your own experience. We've got the little emoji or emoticon kind of things up there you can use to raise your hand or like something or whatever. And then our Elmo rule of enough, let's move on, and making space for each other, not others, sorry.
Thank you, Wendy. All right, so where we are in the process, we have been developing and refining strategies for the past few meetings, and we prioritized those last time, but it was really important to land on the best strategies we could to meet our goal. And so then between last meeting and this meeting, we're creating the implementation framework and metrics. So it's pretty exciting. We're moving right along the plan development. The end is in sight. So again, last time we discussed what strategies will most help us achieve our 2030 goals. And are we comfortable with the number of strategies that we've prioritized? Because this is a community-owned plan, so we all need to ensure the success of it. Today, we'll be asking those questions. What are the potential impacts of our strategies? And how can those impacts inform the indicators that we're going to be using to measure success of the plan? Helping us to kind of drill down to the metrics that we'll be trying to keep track of. So over the next 2 meetings, we'll come back together on July 15th and again on August 5th, and we'll be thinking about the next steps. How can we equitably implement the plan, and how will we ensure accountability and transparency? So more of those details about what these strategies, the details of the strategies. But for now, today we're going to be focused on the impacts. All right, so just to remind you of the draft structure, we have made our way all the way down to prioritize the strategies to help us reach our goals. And now we are looking at the impacts that will lead to a more equitable, resilient, and adaptive Richmond. From there, we'll be developing the indicators for the next meeting so you can see where your work today gets us, and then looking at how we can measure success leading into the implementation next steps. So these are the refined strategies that we came up with. After all the pathways met at the last round, rolling them up and letting some go or be tabled, we landed with transportation has 9, 4 under objective 1, 3 under objective 2, and 2 under objective 3. Let me show you more specifically what that looks like. So under objective 1, which is achieve climate neutrality in the municipal fleet operations and increase resilience and stewardship of our transportation infrastructure, we ended up with 4 strategies. So the first one is called transportation demand management, and that is to reduce emissions in city operations through the support of employee commute alternatives, such as transit and bicycle storage facilities, shower facilities, optimized vehicle routing, telecommuting, and enforcement of the anti-idling policy among city employee drivers. The second one is called complete streets, and that's promote stewardship of the city's Better Streets policy between neighborhoods by connecting areas and green space in order to promote walkability and continuity for all modes of transportation, including transit, bicycles, and micromobility, such as scooters, mopeds, e-bikes, etc. The third strategy is fleet electrification. Develop a municipal fleet electrification plan for all new vehicles and equipment purchases, and incorporate alternative fuel vehicles and e-bikes when electric vehicle options are not available in alignment with the Clean and Green Fleet Report. And then the fourth strategy under this objective is called Resilience Maintenance Plan. So develop a climate resiliency maintenance plan for transportation infrastructure using the Climate Equity Index to prioritize budget requests for resilient maintenance of all bridges, roads, sidewalks, and alleys. Ensure that city infrastructure projects are cited to avoid and minimize impacts to natural resiliency features such as wetlands, forests, and vegetated riparian buffers. Under Objective 2, we have 3 strategies. So just to remind you, that objective is create vibrant neighborhoods where all residents can easily ride transit, walk, or bike to meet daily needs in alignment with Richmond Connects. And so the first prioritized strategy is resilient bus transit system. And the language that you gave us was improve public transit frequency, reliability, safety, access, convenience, user experience, and connectivity, considering both service and stops. Prioritize low-income, low-car ownership areas and connections to shops and shopping and jobs. And then the second strategy is resilient greenway systems. So develop shared use paths, prioritizing the connection of low-income neighborhoods to jobs, necessities, amenities, green spaces, natural resources, and local and regional greenways to empower residents to safely use and protect their biking and walking infrastructure. And then the third one is about biking and walking infrastructure. Develop and prioritize the expansion and repair of pedestrian and bike-friendly infrastructure networks, especially in connection with Richmond 300's development nodes. Prioritize beautification and placemaking efforts along these networks, particularly in underserved and low car ownership communities. And then the third objective is transition the community rapidly and equitably to clean fuel vehicles in transit. So the two strategies under there are around private and commercial electric vehicle transition and the charging infrastructure. So to rapidly and equitably transition, we said facilitate the transition to affordable, convenient, and reliable electric vehicles for buses, shared vehicles, and private vehicles for all Richmonders. And then support the equitable build out of electric vehicle charging stations throughout the city and encourage equitable, geographically distributed installation of these stations in all neighborhoods, reviewing potential barriers to expansion in existing codes and ordinances. So that's the language that we ended up with. What we're going to be doing in our activity today is digging into this language more and the impacts of it. So there is another opportunity today to revise anything that needs clarification. If there's something that's not quite as clear or you notice something that was missing from any of these, please let your facilitator know so that they can make note of that and we can be sure to include it for the next round. So any questions so far on those strategies and where we landed with them? Okay. So we're going to go into what is strategy impact mapping. Well, it's a framework for describing and measuring the wider impacts of urban climate action. And the reason we're doing this is that the strategies produce multiple benefits, which can become powerful tools for more and better designed climate actions, and they're critical to reducing the barriers to action. So by identifying all of these impacts, this is what's going to help us identify our best, the co-benefits and the priorities that are going to help us get to the decision makers that need to allocate the funding and the resources and help us prioritize and figure out how to integrate these ideas, these strategies into different agencies and planning efforts going forward. So this is the evidence that urban stakeholders need to guide and make the case for climate action. We have some pathway steps from the action. Every action or strategy has an output, and every output has an outcome, which is the activity or the change that's resulting from the output. And then there are those impacts, the costs and benefits to our city and all Richmonders. So we've been talking about equity all along and how to make sure that we're being really inclusive in our thinking. But one example is if the net growth in jobs was focused on a part of the population where employment is already high, such as high-skilled workers, but it detracts from those in areas of high unemployment, then that would be inequitable and possibly damaging. So that's an impact that we would want to point out so that we can be sure that's not where we want to be putting our attention. So we're using this to connect all of those impacts, those costs and benefits back to the indicators. They're going to help us measure and track and plan the implementation of this process and identify who's accountable. And then from the impact mapping between this meeting and the next meeting is when the staff is going to be really looking at the indicators that make sense to measure the success of our plan. So this impact mapping process is borrowed from the C40 Urban Climate Action Impacts Framework, and it was designed to help cities explore the wider impacts of city climate action. Yesterday, attached to the email that I sent out was a C40 taxonomy guide, And that just has examples of some of the impacts that we'll be trying to identify for these strategies. It's not exclusive, but it's a really good database just to kind of choose from and also spur your own ideas. So you might want to have that handy. So let's look at this mapping. What does it look like? There's a structure. So at the top of the C40 framework, they have this sector, and that's really our objective. Under that is the action, and that's our strategy. From there is an output, and then the output leads to an outcome, and the outcome leads to the impacts. And so those are the measurable variables that we really want to account for and be sure that we're thinking about in every step of our plan. And again, I keep saying that's going to help identify those potential indicators. And as you know, as you will see, when you dig into these strategies and really think about if then this, and what it leads to, there is a lot to consider, and it'll be interesting to see which impacts affect the greatest amount of stakeholders. And that's really what we're trying to get to at the end, because every strategy has a million impacts if you really want to go down all the rabbit holes, but we really want to focus on the ones that are most important for this planning process. And so those outputs and outcomes are the intermediary steps between the strategy itself and the final impacts. And we need to capture those because they're very important to the success of the plan. So in terms of the structure of our impact maps for each of our strategies, our staff and interns have created the templates for you to use. The strategies are already on there. Those are all the policies and programs and investments initiated with the intention to provide the contribution towards the plan. So that's the strategy definition. And then the outputs have also been pre-populated. It's just our kind of best sense of what the outputs are, but if you have more to add or better language that would make it even clearer, please, your facilitator is going to be walking you through that. So the output is what the strategy produces. I think of it as the thing coming out of the strategy. So it's a service, a facility, the infrastructure, or a financial tool, or some kind of project or planning framework. And then the outcome is the change or activity that's generated by the output that's necessary for the intended impact to occur. So sometimes you might want to go all the way to the impact. You know, sometimes we have a strategy, we know what the desired impact is going to be. Maybe we need to work backwards, depending on, we all think differently. And then the impacts are those medium or long-term effects of the outcome, like reduced traffic congestion, reduced energy bills, reduced ground level ozone, increased jobs, all of those kinds of ideas. So in terms of the specific impacts, I referenced that taxonomy guide that was attached to the email yesterday. And on the right is just one of the pages. These are the economic impacts with related to environmental quality. So you can see, you know, increased biodiversity or improvements in air quality. These are all ideas of impacts that we might want to capture. So when we think of the impacts, especially related to climate, we're looking at the 3 pillars of sustainability, so social, economic, and environmental. And here are the 7 community priorities, just to remind you. We are trying to get to all of those impacts that are going to address these priorities so we can center equity in our strategies. So we're looking for those impacts that address racial equity and environmental justice and have the potential to promote racial equity and support historically disenfranchised communities. We want to be sure that our efforts are promoting government accountability and transparency. Hopefully, these strategies have the opportunity to build community wealth, increase jobs, and access to education. In terms of housing and buildings, does the strategy have the potential to expand affordable housing and reduce housing cost burden? Certainly transportation costs, access to jobs. And then Neighborhoods, the potential to support beautiful and safe neighborhoods in terms of health and well-being, of course, and it's, you know, we want clean air, so we have lower asthma rates. And then let's see, engagement and communications, the potential to support equitable engagement and communication. How can we use our strategies to really reach the folks who do not feel engaged with city processes and planning? So as you're looking for the impacts that connect the strategies back to our community priorities, you'll be thinking about the ones that are most relevant to this planning process and the criteria that we use to develop the strategies in the first place. Remember, reducing carbon emissions, reducing urban heat island effects, preventing flooding, or at least you know, shortening the time period of adapting to climate change and recovering from disaster events. And then, of course, the priorities I just went over. So it's a systemic perspective. City life is highly interconnected because, as we all know, the environment, society, and the economy all impact each other in complex dynamics. People's health and prosperity are intimately dependent on environmental management and biodiversity. Safety and fairness of jobs enhance physical and mental health. Government accountability and community engagement improve all aspects of city life, from community scale projects that enhance neighborhood livability to the better design and monitoring of our policies. The aesthetic quality and cultural heritage of Richmond are drivers of tourism and economic prosperity. And improved equality is directly related to trust, civic participation, social cohesion, and ultimately sustainability. So you'll want to reference that C40 taxonomy guide for some additional ideas, but I know that you all have lots of thoughts of your own. So that's why you're here, to give us your expertise and share your lived experience and how you see these strategies touching you from your different perspectives. So this is an example of a transportation impact map. If we use this strategy from Objective 2 called Resilient Bus Transit System, the language is improve public transit frequency, reliability, safety, access, convenience, user experience, and connectivity, considering both service and stops. Prioritize low-income, low car ownership areas and connections to shopping and jobs. So we identified the strategy, which is the Resilient Bus Transit System with the bus infrastructure improvement and optimization. The two outputs are highlighted here. We identified service and stops, improved bus stops, and improved and more reliable bus service as the two outputs of that strategy. And then the outcomes, you know, what is the actual result? What's the change in behavior or the activity coming out of those two outputs? Well, if we say improved bus stops leads to increased bus ridership as an outcome, what are the impacts of that? What are the medium and long-term impacts? Well, this could lead to lower personal vehicle use, which would obviously lead to pollution reductions, as long as we have clean buses and transit system, and then that's lower greenhouse gas emissions. If we think of it in terms of improved access to jobs and amenities, then that leads to more inclusive communities, more job opportunities, and increased job security. And you know, we can get at more impacts around economic viability. And I missed one up here. So pollution reductions also leads to improved public health and air quality. Then the second output, improved and more reliable bus service, leads to, of course, increased bus ridership, but also increased connectivity across Richmond. And then that one leads to the improved access to jobs and amenities. Another outcome from the improved service is lower ongoing maintenance costs. That leads to decreased city spending, and then there's resource allocation for other programs. So this is just an example, and on this one in particular, if you have more ideas, we would love to see them, but we're trying to get at the impacts at the end of the day that are meeting the greatest need and really addressing the stakeholders that that'll give us the most benefit. Any questions about this example? All right, so the output is the most tangible thing. The outcome is what did the output lead to, and the impact is what is the most impactful and important, measurable impact of the strategy. So with that, we're going to go into our activity. And like I said, each of the strategies has a map. It's in the Google slide deck, so you can look at them yourself, but our facilitators will be the ones moving the text boxes around, the arrows, and adding the language. So it's really just a discussion. It's space for you guys to be thinking and sharing back and forth. If you do have more comments that you want to have us consider, whether it's language to the strategy itself or just some ideas to consider that you can't quite figure out in the 30 minutes that you have to add to the impacts, feel free to type into the comments portion at the bottom of that slide. But you'll want to, I think the first helpful activity to do with the strategy is consider the scale and scope and the business as usual scenario. So if we didn't improve the bus transit system, what would that mean? Be thinking about, would that just mean that we would not have improved ridership? We would continue to have high rates of single occupancy vehicles, whatever those are. Think of that business as usual case that we're trying to change. And that'll help you start thinking in the direction of the getting to the impacts that we're trying to get to. So when you think about the outputs, again, you're going to the direct tangible results of the strategy. The outcomes are then the change generated by that output, and then the potential impacts that will result from the strategy. Keep thinking about the equity considerations, who are the key stakeholders, and what are their priorities and concerns. I think we had a really good discussion at the end of last month's meeting about our strategies, and we really, while they're all great strategies, we need to prioritize the ones that are getting to the stakeholders that we're talking about and their priorities and concerns. So, and then there are positive and negative impacts. So please identify the negative ones as well, and your facilitator can put a red box around it so we can see that that's something we want to pay attention to or consider in the next in the development of the strategy as a potential con. So again, you're shooting for the impacts that are most significant. But what we're going to do now is,
and Dawn, if we could wait,
yes.
it'll say Angela has a question or has her hand up.
Oh, please. Yes.
Hello. Just quick question. Talking about the strategies and the impact of the strategies, historically, when, we know what's best for us, there typically might be some backlash from organizations that are bigger than, the government at some point. So when we're looking at these strategies, should we also be thinking about like what people or organizations or companies will be upset about if these, like for instance, car manufacturing, like people that have special interests in politicians or what have you. So is that also along the lines of what you want us to brainstorm, or is it just like the impact of the objective itself on the community, positives and negatives?
So that's a great point. And my first thought, and please others jump in if you have ideas too, but my first thought is we're trying to get to the impacts where we can address the questions and concerns of the decision makers. So, if that's an impact that could come out of this, I think this morning we are doing waste, and if we have strict industrial waste policies, then that might turn away some new manufacturing companies, and we need to be aware of that. Okay, well, let's think that through all the way to the end, to make sure that we are identifying any potential barriers to the strategy being successful. Does that help? Okay, great. Great question. All right, so I am going to be, what you're going to do is pick a facilitator, basically, and you're going to stay with that one the whole time. You're going to work on those two strategies. If for some reason you see one under Wendy and one under Alex, and you want to work on the one with Wendy, and then you really feel strongly that you have a lot to add on one with Alex, you can come back to me in the main room and I can put you in the other one. But for the most part, you'll be staying where you are for the whole hour, and your facilitator will kind of guide the instructions and the timing on the two, depending on, some are more complicated than others. But I will be going over the municipal transportation demand management strategy and the municipal fleet electrification strategy. So you can go into the Google deck on this slide and you can type in your name under sign up if you want to stick with me on that strategy. If you want to talk about complete streets and the resilience maintenance plan, you can type your name under Alex. If you want to talk about resilient greenway systems and biking and walking infrastructure, you can go under David. And if you want to talk about private and commercial electric vehicle transition and the charging infrastructure, you can put your name under Wendy. And if you can't get into the Google slide deck to type your name yourself, you can let Wendy know, either raise your hand, speak out loud, or go into the chat and let her know, and she'll put your name in there. So it's 1:33. We're going to take a break and come back at 1:40, and I'll send you into those rooms. But for now, I'm going to start setting up the breakouts. We have a smaller group. I'm not sure why we lost everyone today. We have so many, we have some transportation experts in this group that I wish were here today, but we will do the best with the experts we have, and we're just appreciative that you're here. All right. Hey, Max, good timing. Speaking of transportation experts. So I'll just repeat what we're doing now for your benefit. We're going into a break, and we're doing an activity called impact mapping. And so what you're going to choose is the block that you think you have the most knowledge to add to. And you're going to type your name in the Google Doc, or just let Wendy know, and she will put your name in there. And I'm going to divide up everyone up into breakout rooms, and we're going to come back together at 1:40 and send you in those rooms, and you'll get more instruction once you're there.
Just let me know if you want me to add your name. Let's see, Wyatt in the TDM group, which is objective 1. Okay.
And Wendy, you can put me in whichever group is the least popular at the end, just so we don't have the thing from yesterday.
Okay. All right. Thanks. So far, I'm the least popular, Jeff, so it might be you.
I planned it that way, Wendy. That way it's unique.
Let's see, Max is going to do complete streets or bike head. Let's see. How about I'll put you in complete streets? Let's see. Why is it not letting me click? Just a sec. There we go. Okay. Yeah, and feel free to take a little break if you're signed up or not.
All right, I think I got it figured out. So I'm going to open up the rooms in a minute. Just to give you a heads up, it is kind of a slow transition. It's not as quick as Zoom. So hopefully you'll get there eventually, but if there is a problem, I'll be in the main room. So feel free to come back. In the top right you should have a couple of buttons. So leave in red is closing out the whole meeting. If you want to come back to the main room, you'll just click on the return or leave breakout or return to main meeting. But again, just log back in and I can send you back into your room if something does happen. So I think that's it. I'm going to send you into your room so your facilitator can kind of give you instructions. And as folks are coming back in, you can get oriented to the strategies. Any questions before I click start rooms? Okay, let's see if this works. I think it worked. Okay, so we've got Angela and Carrie and Wyatt. Hey folks, how are you?
Okay, thanks.
Hey.
All right, so the first one is transportation demand management. And let me get this out of presentation view so I can type in it. All right. So, reduce emissions in city operations through the support of employee commute alternatives such as transit and bicycle storage facilities, shower facilities, optimized vehicle routing, telecommuting, and enforcement of the anti-idling policy among city employee drivers. So we've identified the strategy as this transportation demand management plan with these two subcomponents of employee commute alternatives and anti-idling policy enforcement. Does that cover all of it? I think possibly. So then the outputs of the employee commute alternatives are more installed bike facilities and amenities, improved public transit routes and reliability, and more flexible telecommuting policies. And then the output of an anti-idling policy enforcement would be increased penalties for vehicle idling. So we want to think through the outcomes. Let's start with, well, before I do that, do you guys have any other suggestions on outputs of the transportation demand management plan? For city operations. Okay, so if we start with more installed bike facilities and amenities like showers, what are the outcomes of that? What are the activities that are going to happen? So more employees will ride their bikes, right? Can you think of anything else?
I think that makes sense.
Are there any other outcomes from more installed bike facilities?
I mean, more people who aren't employees will probably ride as well.
Right.
Folks who need to access city services.
Okay. So then let's think about the impacts of more employees riding their bikes to work.
Reduced emissions from a vehicle, a gas-powered vehicle, that is.
Okay.
Theoretically, this would allow, I mean, I don't know if this is just specific to the bikes, but the entirety of transportation demand management, if done right, it would allow the city to have less parking near a lot of its facilities. So then we could start to repurpose some city land for other things that we'd like to do. Green space, new housing, I don't know, other facilities that agencies that have needed a location for something, that kind of stuff.
Okay, so an output, maybe it's of this one, more installed bike facilities, and an outcome could be less parking requirement. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, I mean, for any publicly owned lots, there's less of an argument to maintain those. We could theoretically be transitioning those away from parking to new uses.
Mm-hmm.
Even if it's just selling them off and letting other people build stuff on them, it would be better than just having publicly owned parking lots.
Okay. So less parking requirements. More land availability, or
more space for other stuff.
how do I say that? More
Like parking areas could be repurposed for other. Excuse me.
That's a good formulation.
Okay, and if we have repurposed parking areas, what is that getting at as impacts to our stakeholders?
I mean, I just saw that, I think it was Philadelphia. They just converted one of their municipal parking lots. It was just a surface lot into park space. So they just kind of redid it very similarly to kind of how the ICA did their Black Space Matters, where they did like a bunch of beautiful art on the ground, set up a lot of seating, put a lot of like potted plants everywhere, and just kind of created more space for people.
Okay, and maybe at the end of the day, that's going to lead to community health and cohesion or something.
Or impacts on the other objectives, with creating green space or
Okay, I like that. Let's go back to, okay, more employees will ride bikes to work, reduce emissions from vehicles. I think when they ride their bikes, they're also going to be healthier, right? What are some other impacts of employees riding bikes to work? Can you think of any?
Well, if we're reducing emissions, then that improves air quality.
Yep.
Which also gets back to improved health.
Yes. Are there any negatives we want to capture that we need to consider? Or barriers to this output?
The only question that arises is like what the, hold on, let me make sure I'm talking about the right thing here. Like the amenities, like showers, like what would that be a responsibility of employers or the city to install the, like, are they public showers? Are they within an office space? I guess I'm having a hard time visualizing that. So if anyone has any.
Yeah, I think someone was saying that if we're going to encourage employee commutes, then there have to be facilities where they can shower and lockers and lock their bike up and things like that, or it's just not going to work.
Yeah, absolutely. But that could be like a barrier, and somebody can very quickly say, well, we can't do showers. This isn't going to work. And then everything just be squashed. So maybe I don't know what could be like. I guess I can't. Is that something that's going to come back on the city, and that should that be like an objective that's like this is why we need to install showers, and should that be on its own, or should we wrap it into where it is, keep it where it's at?
Anyone have any thoughts? Maybe we just put some red text here that says consider barriers. Because if you can't get past that output, you're not going to get your outcomes.
True.
Okay.
I think that's a great point Angela raised. I mean, we have showers at GRTC for the operators and mechanics to use, but obviously we're a secure facility, so we're not entertaining riders walking up and using the showers. It's still dedicated for staff to be able to use.
And if it was like expanded to all GRTC employees, would the facility would be able to accommodate everyone?
Yeah, that's a great point too. You'd have to consider volume daily.
Were you saying privacy or more like safety? Or what was the barrier, you think?
Just the facility itself, just having the facility, if we say, we want to push biking to work for city employees or employees in general that live in the city, that work in the city, and we say, this is an output and showers is included in that, then that has to be part of the plan too, and has to be part of the plan.
Okay, so like facilities master planning, and which is something that's going on right now, a facilities master plan. So that's something that needs to be thought about. Yeah.
Yeah. I forgot there was a facilities and building management team. So
yeah, that's a good one. Okay, great. So then this next one, improved public transit routes and reliability. If that's an output of creating employee commute alternatives.
I think the first three outcomes of the first output, it goes with those as well. Improved transit routes would also lead to more employees biking to work, also lead to people who need access to city services and less parking requirements. I'm also thinking of like time it takes from place to place. That may be impacted and improved as well.
So an outcome would be more efficient or less time travel.
Yeah, I would say something like more efficient commutes might be.
Yeah. And then if we have more efficient commutes, what is the outcome of that? Happier people, better mental health.
Work-life balance. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, that exactly gets at the core of the story that we told with the Pulse. The tagline for it from marketing was "More time for life," because it was a faster, more frequent, more reliable, dedicated line, with the impact to the individual being that you have more time to do other things, whether it's play with your family and friends or work, if that's what your commute is just enabling you to do. I know that when we opened that summer, I spoke with a employee at Willow Lawn who said that they were saving 45 minutes on their total commute because of the Pulse opening and just the way that the connections with the local routes worked. So that's workforce efficiency too.
I was just thinking about that today when I was literally like, I've had back-to-back Zoom calls since 8 o'clock. I'm like, when did I have time to drive? Like, when was that?
That's right. Okay, so say that again about workforce. More efficient commutes leads to improved quality of life. Is it also, what did you say about workforce?
Yeah, it's almost like your time available to work, to earn, is improved as well. That if you wanted to work the extra 30 minutes at your shift, then you could get that extra 30 minutes of pay because overall your commute is now shorter and you can afford that time to do what you want or need to do with it.
Maybe it's just more job stability, improved quality of life, improved health and well-being.
Yeah, and job stability is a good way of putting it, because if the routes are more efficient routes mean that you can get to work. And as much as I want to say, people shouldn't fire those who are on the bus line.
Right. It happens.
Working, it happens, right?
Yeah. I do have a question for you. Is there like a statistic that it's safer to ride the bus than drive a car?
Ooh,
I don't have the number for you, but it's, tenths of percentiles. You are far safer as a passenger in a bus than as a passenger or driver in an automobile.
So could we say improve safety if more people ride the bus than improve public safety?
So I guess what would that be? Maybe, yeah, improve public safety, decreased risk of fatality.
Traffic fatalities.
Right, for you as a passenger.
I just saw one statistic I'm like Googling right now that says, according to, I don't know who John Littman is, but it's 20 times safer. I know, sorry, that's intercity rail, but everything that I'm like seeing is that it's much more safer to drive. I'm sure there's a statistic out there we can quote if we just dig a little.
I just have to move this onto 2 slides so we have more room. Okay, so improve public transit routes and reliability. An outcome is, say that one more time, like improved public safety or transit commuting safety, or
I would say in public safety.
Reduce traffic fatalities.
Right. Decreased, yes, exactly. Decreased traffic fatalities.
Or just like bodily injury in general.
Yep.
Is we can just all encompass traffic fatalities and bodily injury resulting from car accidents or something.
Okay.
And then another outcome would be increased ridership. And I mean, that's just well-established fact anywhere. is when your transit is better, more people will use it.
And so what is the
That reduces single occupancy vehicle miles traveled. Which then goes back to our top impact: reduced emissions from vehicles, improved air quality, increased community health and well-being. So increased ridership reduces single occupancy vehicle miles traveled. Single, I know it's a long phrase, single occupancy vehicle miles traveled, or VMI for short, or excuse me, VMT.
Okay.
And then that improves air quality and increases community health and well-being. And then this is going to be getting real deep in the weeds, but maybe it's worth mentioning. Increased ridership also means increased formula funding for your transit system. As more people ride and use your system, you've demonstrated that you're a good public investment, and you get more state and federal funding, which reduces the burden on the locality.
Okay.
And then therefore your locality can invest dollars that they were having to for the bus to do other things, whether it's more good things for public transit or more of the connected infrastructure projects that they want related to transit, or not transit at all.
Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to say this. What you were just talking about is from the increased ridership, right?
Yep.
Okay, so increased ridership leads to a final impact of...
It's increased formula funding from state and federal, which, and that's your next thing, or you can put it in that block, which reduces the locality's burden.
Okay. And then the final impact is going to be something about...
you can, the locality can spend those dollars doing something else. Maybe it is, they can take the same budget that they were giving to the transit system, and the difference that they now are getting covered by federal or state dollars, they can then do other things with it. Maybe it's make another route more frequent. Maybe it's extend service hours, or maybe it's look at infrastructure. What can we do with benches and shelters and sidewalks? So, which would all lead back to improved community spaces, quality of life, depending on how they choose to use the funding.
Carrie, I have a question for you. Do you know of any statistics around like the social impacts of public transportation? So like just like building, community camaraderie, or, I'm just thinking of like more like on a social level. If there's any
more
positives.
of the so-and-so intangibles.
Yeah.
Wyatt, you have a really good global perspective. I don't think that has been done here in Richmond before. I can tell you anecdotally that I do hear from riders about how important that on the bus at the stop social connection is.
Mm-hmm.
Just for those, hey, how are you doing?
Mm-hmm.
I've had someone tell me, it's just good to be seen every day. but yeah, I would need to look and see if there's maybe some social science work around public transit. There has to be.
Mhm.
Yeah, I don't know if I can add any factoids in, but I've heard a lot of the same things Carrie has anecdotally, just because riding transit brings you into contact with people that you otherwise wouldn't share social circles with, whether it's elderly people, parents with young kids, disabled folks. So it just kind of builds your understanding and empathy for groups that you wouldn't naturally interact with.
Yeah, I think if we could formulate some sort of impact surrounding that with that's precise and not, maybe it'd be something we come back to. I think that that's important because also for, there's a part of society that thinks that public transportation is used because of necessity. And like I use the bus, but I have a car. I'd like to figure out a way that, with this project, we can make that more, not acceptable, but, that it's not just for people. Yeah, it's not just for people that don't have cars, and these are the impacts of taking the bus, connecting with your community, in other words. Maybe that could be a good one, like just a heightened connection with the community might be good.
Okay.
Or increased connection with the community.
I think that sounds good.
And that's coming off of what, though?
I think it was the last. Oh, I gotta pull this open on my.
I guess it's just the increased ridership, right? I'm going to do is I'm going to delete some of this because you guys are doing awesome, so you don't need all that guidance. So I think that one is coming off of
maybe improved health and well-being.
Or is it just from increased ridership? Then we're
okay, I see.
Is that what you were saying by being on the bus together?
Yeah, I mean, if if you feel good and benefit personally from that social environment, then yes, you're more likely to use it.
Mm-hmm.
People who, I just dropped a link in. It was interesting. I'm trying to find some of these social science papers, but that's what this one was just talking about, that even social cues when writing, which can also be culturally different around the world, can impact someone's comfort level when using public transportation. When we were at the beginning of the pandemic last year and trying to figure out how to shift people's behavior to wearing masks on the bus before it was legally required, it was interesting to read, and Wyatt knows this from being, a world traveler and exposed to other transit systems all over the world. But in Japan, face masks are already culturally normative there. So it wasn't a big deal to have that in place on their public transit. And socially on public transit, it's taboo to be talking and interacting and making noise on the bus. Whereas in Richmond, I think most of us would agree that that's the exact opposite. You're almost encouraged to have conversations with each other when you're riding, reacting to what you see outside, what you see, what you're hearing inside the bus.
Yeah, great point. Okay, well, this looks great. Y'all did awesome with that one. Let's go to the second part of that strategy that talks about anti-idling and telecommute policies. So if we're talking about an anti-idling policy enforcement as the strategy, the output is going to be penalties. for vehicle idling. You know, maybe it's going to be more limited use of, you know, maybe employees would have to, I don't know, there are all kinds of things you can do to penalize employees, performance evaluations or whatever. But what would the outcomes be of enforcing anti-idling policies?
Just for clarification, like when we're talking about the municipal fleet, is that including the police department?
Yes.
So like when they're like taking radar or like hanging out in their vehicles and they're in their vehicles with the air conditioning on in 100-degree weather, is that
well, the
would that be a
anti-idling
penalty?
policy is going to have some caveats for things like that, you know.
Okay.
Hopefully we can electrify that fleet and then they can run things off of the battery and we're not dealing with pollution. But it's more for when, you know, they're leaving trucks running on the side of the road while they're doing some work, or they run back to the office, leave the car running because they think they're going to run in and get something off their desk, and then the phone rings and it's left running all that time. So these things, it's just like any of us, you know, slipping up. But you have to enforce it. You have someone at the top has to say, no, this is a rule. We're going to enforce this. There are going to be penalties. So what are the outcomes of that increased enforcement?
How would it be enforced even? Like reporting? Like
That's what I was
after the
thinking.
car? Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it might be, I guess, akin to the, you know, on the back of vehicles where it says, how safe am I driving? And then there's a phone number and a vehicle number assigned to it, and it relies on the public reporting.
Yeah. Being a former driver of a GSA vehicle, I've gotten calls on me for things that I'm like, I did not do that. I feel like sometimes you could be targeted for
we have the same thing on the buses, so it's good that we have our security footage because we can prove that something did not happen according to what someone claimed.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah,
so
I think so. Just with this one, my hunch is, you know, enforcement is a little bit like, I can't visualize that being fair and having, you know, checks and balances and what do we do in that case? Like, so like, could it be something more like there is a policy and there's like, we're championing this, but what's like the middle, like, I don't know. I'm just thinking I'm a verbal processor, so I tend to talk my way through things.
Great.
Is anybody else kind of understanding where I'm coming from? Like, creating a policy would be great. That would lead to, in an ideal world, lead to, you know, less gas emissions or less emissions if they were not in electric vehicles. And more safe. Like, I don't know if vehicles get stolen if they're left running. Like, I don't think that's a problem. So I don't think that would be an outcome. I guess I'm just trying to visualize this.
Well, if it'll help, I'll share because GRTC does have an anti-idling policy already, and I can share with y'all our lessons learned.
Okay.
So the policy is not what always happens in practice, and there are valid reasons why the policy doesn't fit every situation. So our anti-idling policy is supposed to be 5 minutes. However, most layovers or end of the line breaks are going to be longer than 5 minutes. And there's another policy that operators have to provide good customer service, including on their end of the line breaks, meaning practically that if there is a passenger who is getting on the bus at that end of the line stop, or is still on the bus because they're not at their destination yet, but they have to sit on the bus and wait. You're not going to turn off that bus and put that customer in the cold or the heat, depending on the weather. You're going to leave the bus running for the 10 to 20 minutes that you're on break in many cases, so that that customer is taken care of and that the bus is staying comfortable for them. So that's an example where we have a policy, but in practice, we have another policy that would trump it, supersede it.
Let me ask, we have a couple
yeah.
folks join us. So Jeff and David and Jason, what did you guys want to go somewhere else, or did you finish, or do you have a question?
We finished, and we're what you guys are talking about is intriguing to me, so I'm happy to stay here for now.
Okay, great. How about you two, Jeff?
Yeah.
David, do you want to go to one of the other ones and see how they're doing, or stay here? Or?
I'm flexible. I'll just stay here.
Okay. All right. So, yeah, I hear you, Carrie. So if the output is champion anti-idling policy updates, needs to be revisited and maybe updated, and then we champion it. That's the output. One outcome is the public reporting, which is, it is what it is. And then the increased penalties for vehicle idling. Can you think of other outcomes or activities that come from this update? Because what you were talking about, Carrie, I think is the updates piece of it. We need to make sure that there are provisions so that we are putting safety and health and those things first.
Are there any sort of it seems like penalties for vehicle idling is a proverbial stick. Are there any carrots for incentivizing people?
Yeah, why don't we do another one? Okay, well, let's think about the impacts. So, you know what, David, I'm wondering, we haven't even gotten to our second one yet. Better streets policy enforcement and steward. Oh, someone did. That's the other one that was done. Sorry. Municipal fleet electrification plan. Would you guys like to go talk about that? Okay, so I'll send you back in. So I have David and Jeff. Anyone else want to go to that one? Municipal fleet electrification.
I'll go back to that one as well.
Who was that? Jason?
That was Jason, sorry.
Okay, great. Gosh, Teams is so annoying.
That's why DOT makes us use it.
Ugh. Well, it's opening. Hopefully you go back. If not, stay with us. All right. So, sorry. On the public reporting one, what are the impacts of employee morale, right? Like it's
it's staff time to investigate each of these. I mean, for example, anytime we get a complaint about improper operation of the vehicle, we have to pull the GPS history. The safety staffer has to review the GPS log. If there's security footage that is requested or needed to confirm or deny, invalidate the complaint, then they have to physically go get the hard drive, the video drive off of the bus, download it, view it. So it takes time. So that's money.
Yep. Okay. And then Is there any sense, like, it sounds like all of us have experience on the wrong end of this, but is there anything good that comes of public engagement and them feeling empowered to complain? Maybe not. Maybe there's enough of that. Okay, we'll leave it off.
I just don't know if I don't know what the impact is currently of idling city vehicles. So I guess that would be what I would like. What is the impact now? And do community members need to speak up when it happens because it's such a detriment to the environment? You know what I mean?
Well, it is. If you think of any trucks, and it's a city, so you got a lot of congestion, you have a lot of alleys, and anytime work trucks are out there doing things, if the driver forgets to turn it off, then there's all those emissions. We don't have any electric vehicles yet. So this is kind of a transition to electric vehicles. In the meantime, we do want to, we have an anti-island policy.
Happen a lot?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Oh, yeah. It's any locality. There are a lot of emissions from heavy duty vehicles.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so then incentives for vehicle anti-idling. You're saving fuel costs.
But the employees aren't paying for the fuel costs anyway. So is that an incentive for them? Is that what he was? I'm saying
if there is an incentive, it's more of an output. Well, incentives for vehicle anti-idling leads to the outcome is like employees turning off vehicles, and then that is what leads to saving fuel costs. And improved air quality. Then the penalty side, maybe we don't need that. We're not.
Carrie or Wyatt, what are the penalties for like a person at GRTC or somewhere else? What does that look like?
So it would follow basically the union rules of discipline. So, and I'm not even privy to all of it. So I just know in general the progression of steps. If a complaint is validated, then there is a first step of discipline. It's usually an in-office conversation or the equivalent of a verbal warning. After that, I believe it progresses to some kind of written on your file. After that, I believe it can progress to what they call days in the street. There's various versions of are you paid or not paid. If it keeps getting worse, then it could go to suspension, etc. I am not aware of anyone going through that many steps just for idling.
Yeah. So with the current policy that's in place with the city, is increasing those penalties. Do we have any insight as to what the current penalties are, and if increasing penalties will is it fair for is it fair, I guess is my question. Because if we go straight from okay, skip the warning and go straight, increase makes me kind of nervous. So I just want to know what the current penalties are before saying that.
Yeah, I think it's just warnings.
Okay.
When I've been involved, it's never gotten to the point where they're going to start charging staff for fuel costs or anything,
Okay.
as far as I know. But maybe we take the penalty. I like what he's saying. Let's keep it positive. Incentives.
Or even like saying penalty enforcement, you know what I mean? Like,
as an outcome.
yeah, like just like the word increased.
Okay.
Like maybe right now people really are just kind of glazing over the idling thing and not really enforcing it. So specifying enforced penalties, whatever whenever the policy update is, I just think that reads a little bit more less threatening and like, you're not going to lose your job if you idle. That's just my perspective.
So maybe it's more like the impact is improved employee awareness.
Mm-hmm.
And then that leads to community. It's like education and improved employee awareness also leads to save fuel costs.
And like, ownership, employee awareness and ownership of
government accountability.
Yeah.
And I think it goes back to the community, to leading by example, all of these, that's what it's really about.
Agreed.
Okay, so at the end of the day, we have the anti-idling policy could be a public expense if it's not done right, but it will ultimately lead to government accountability, saving fuel costs, and improved air quality. Is that good enough? Okay, so let's go back to the top then for the for telecommuting. What are your thoughts on the outcomes of telecommuting?
No commute.
Yeah, reduced fuel cost for the individual.
Well, I think that's an
impact.
Yeah, I think so. There are lots of impacts. Gosh, this is like such a can of worms, the whole telecommuting thing. So add an error to this. Okay, so an outcome is going to be more employees commute or work from home. And then that's going to lead to reduced fuel cost to the individual, reduced energy costs to the city. I think that a negative is there's a sense of teamwork and collaboration that is hard to replace, but I'm not quite sure how to say that. I think it's something to pay attention to because it's the accountability, right? Like trust, you lose a little bit of trust and teamwork and collaboration, the things that you take kind of for granted in the workplace. So this is new society going in this direction. So we want to be able to address those barriers. What do you guys see as those barriers to note?
I guess this is Carrie. I would just say that we also have to be cognizant that what each of us as an individual may see as a negative for what you just described is actually a positive for someone who works and learns differently. The traditional office environment is for able-bodied, normative, etc., extroverted personalities. So it fits a very specific type of workflow and individual that may be more difficult for someone else to function in. So I would just be careful about calling one thing positive or negative, because what you experience as a negative is actually someone else positive.
Right.
I would say that's been a lesson learned for me over the past year is better understanding.
So maybe it's like
I'm sorry, go ahead.
Improved awareness, or hey, Calvin, did you mean to come back to this group?
Yes, I believe Wendy should be coming back.
I'm here. Yeah.
Hey, Wendy.
Yeah. We finished up. Hi.
Oh, okay, great. Well, we're just finishing up this one. If you want to help us, we're talking about more flexible telecommuting policies, and the outcome is that more employees work from home. So the impacts, we have reduced fuel costs to the individual, reduced energy costs to the city. And then we were talking about, there are these kind of team dynamics that are changing through this telecommute virtual environment. But what Carrie was saying is that what's a negative to some is a positive to others, because she said it much better than I'm saying. But Carrie, do you want to repeat what you said?
So the American traditional office is structured around rewarding and prioritizing able-bodied, more extroverted, team collaborative individuals and personalities. And what telework has permitted is for some of these other personalities and abilities to function better without having to adapt themselves and their workflow to the traditional in-office environment. So I'm not discounting that some people who thrive in an office environment should not want to get back into an office environment where they can thrive. I think the point is that there's now more diversity of options so that you can work in your best environment, whatever that looks like, whether for you it's at home or a blend or fully in the office in person. I think that the benefit is that now we get it better to understand the variety of environments where we can be at our best.
Calvin's raising his hand, I think.
Calvin, what you got?
We just had this conversation last week. One of my friends down in Fort Bragg owns, I think, a small business. So one of the things that we have seen or he have seen with working from home, if you look at the larger picture of it, think about the folks that come to work every day. You're going to stop to get gas, so now you're not getting gas. You're going to stop to get coffee, so now that coffee shop have lost some businesses. We go out to lunch. I'm just, looking at the whole community, and if the whole, community work from home. Think about how many folks do not go to lunch that now, and on one of the negative thing really ain't got nothing to do with this. They were saying a lot of folks have gained weight from just, sitting at home. You don't have to get dressed. You could just still be in your whatever and eat all day and be on the computer. But we definitely had this conversation last week, and we talked about how all of the smaller folks that will be out of work are out of work because of folks that, work from home. Stopping by the donut shop. Well, there's no one going to the donut shop today. So that definitely impact a lot of the small businesses, I believe, in the community.
That's a great point.
Even the JRTC buses, if we all work from home in the city, nobody's riding the bus. So now what do you do with those employees?
We are the essential workforce jobs bus.
Yeah, no, I got you. You're right. But I'm just thinking, as if we all stayed home, think about
Yeah.
how many jobs would be lost. And that would definitely impact even some revenue.
I think
Great.
Calvin's point is great about the connected businesses and the ripple effects.
Right. Well, because I think of Richmond, like downtown Richmond, like 15 years ago, I mean, it was pretty dead and empty because there weren't any, everybody came to work and went home, and there weren't really restaurants and things for them to stay and go to. And so.
I wish you would tell my husband that, because we get DoorDash and Grubhub like every day for lunch, and so that's increasing the cars on the road, but it's still, it's like a shift in how people are getting food. So, we've been work from home for a year, and as much as I don't like eating out, I'm way busier now than I was before we went remote for some reason. So, there's pros and cons, definitely.
And if you also think about it, when you work in your office, you have to go shopping for even clothes every now and then. When you work from home forever, when last time you have to go shopping for clothes? You can just wait
Dry
or whatever.
cleaning. You don't need dry cleaning and stuff.
So yeah, it changes. It changes a lot.
I guess it benefits some, but it maybe is a negative for others. If you're a small business
that's correct.
It supports workers in some way, peripherally.
Yeah, it changes the whole business model.
Yes, ma'am.
Now that others are joining us, we're just talking about this telecommuting, and I think we could spend a whole meeting talking about that one, the outputs, outcomes, and impacts. While I have this up before we kind of circle back, does anyone have any thoughts they want to add to this conversation?
Yeah, I would just say, I don't think it's a purely, people don't go places so they don't spend money thing. I'm working from home, and I was just able to go to my local deli and buy a sandwich for lunch because I was so packed between meetings. I didn't really have time. So I think it shifts where people spend their money, but I don't think it's ultimately a bad thing.
Well, and kind of taking that point a little further, I guess if you're saving money because you're not buying fuel or paying for fuel or work clothes and things like that, you might have more disposable income to spend on things like dining out.
Yeah. Great. Okay, well, I think we're all back together. Do we have all 4 groups? Is David back, or is he still? Nope. Oh, it's not everyone. Okay, it's just Wendy's and Alex's group. Yeah, David finished early and he came back, and then we sent him off to work on our second one because this one was massive.
Yeah, they do have a lot.
Yeah, this is 2 slides. First one was on employee commute alternatives with more installed bike facilities and amenities and improved public transit routes and reliability, which led to a lot. And then the second piece of this is the telecommuting and the anti-idling. So.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Any other thoughts while we're waiting for David to come back?
Well, I guess if you switch to electric vehicles, the anti-idling thing sort of becomes a moot point, because.
Well, and that's what we were saying, that in the meantime, with us not having any heavy duty vehicles that are electric,
right,
in a city with alleys and congestion, there are a lot of idling vehicles. And while, Calvin, you know more than anybody. Oh, you have something to say? I see your hand up.
I think it still is
before. Okay. But yeah, when you're, if you're not enforcing the anti-idling, it's easy. I mean, people want to, they're focusing on their job. They're focusing on safety. They, they want to stay cool, or they'll jump out of the car to go move something out of the road, and then a citizen starts talking to them, and then 5 minutes later, it's still idling. So there are all kinds of reasons for it, but it's all about like anything else, like adjusting your thermostat. If you're not paying attention, then these are the kinds of things that you start slipping on. So in the meantime, the anti-idling is like a transition till we get our vehicle electrification figured out.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think in the non-municipal realm with idling, like, I don't know when it happened, but it used to be back in the day, they had school buses and the kids rode the school bus to school. But nowadays it seems like parents drive their kids to school way more, and so you get all these cars lined up for drop off and carpool drop off and idling and things. And so I guess if you could get them back in the buses or walking or riding their bikes to school.
Interesting.
Separate issue, but I know that my son's elementary had that, this big line of cars wrapped around the block every morning waiting to drop off. And I don't know if it's because, they've got after school activities, or I don't want them to ride the bus, or I don't know. So.
Yeah. The time, they have to get up earlier to get on the bus.
Yeah.
Yeah, mine ride the bus.
Mine did. Okay.
All right. Well, guess they're still finishing that one up. Which ones were you working on?
We were doing electric vehicles, so for buses and for shared use vehicles and private vehicles, trying to help facilitate the shift to more electric vehicles, and then electric vehicle charging infrastructure, getting that equitably distributed.
Fleet or private?
For private. Mm-hmm.
Okay, so this one.
Objective 3, right? Yeah, sorry. Yeah.
Transition buses to EVs, electrified bus transit system. The outcomes are groups using the buses as battery backup.
Yeah.
And then cost savings on fuel and maintenance. Higher upfront costs and repair costs. So is that a negative?
Yeah, I guess I should. Yeah, just didn't change the color.
Less noise pollution. Carrie, what are your thoughts? Oh, did we lose Carrie? I think she did have to leave early, didn't she?
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I would love to hear what she had to say about this.
I know. I figured she was like Calvin. Calvin didn't want to do municipal because he wanted to hear something different. Carrie probably didn't want to do buses because she wanted to hear something different.
Mm-hmm.
So, transition shared vehicles to EVs. Electrified cars leads to reduced gas, space saving. We came up with that one too.
Mm-hmm.
Reduce emissions, how to charge if power goes out.
Right.
What is time and distance changes due to charging?
I didn't put that as a negative. That's just more that you have to, I guess, think a lot more about your, how long it's going to take you to get someplace, because now you have to factor in the time to stop and charge. If you're going on a longer trip, so you need to factor in, okay, I'm going to need to stop X number of times. It's going to add this much time to my trip, as opposed to a gas station stop, which might take you 5 minutes, to fill up. If you're going to charge, it's going to take longer. And then also the distance, like how far can you go on a charge? So again, it's just kind of the considerations you have to think about. More trip planning, I guess, right, Calvin?
Yes, ma'am. 'Cause for example, you can drive to, up to DC for what? Maybe 3 hours, maybe stop once, or you may not even have to stop at all. With one of these EV vehicles, obviously you're going currently is to, 150 is the range. So obviously you're gonna have to stop twice, for a recharge.
So it's not necessarily a negative, it's just more of a
Right.
something to think about, kind of. You know?
Definitely route planning, when you're going
Right.
somewhere.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, what's the end impact then?
Believe it or not, you're gonna have time. Time is involved again, so now you have to add time. So Don, normally if you're driving again up to DC and it normally takes you, 3 hours, you have to add some more time in for charging. Versus like she said, going to, this gas station, you just pull up and you fill up. Currently with every vehicle that's on the street now, you can drive up to DC without having to stop. So that's why time is a factor.
Yep, I live that one. I go up to DC and I have an electric vehicle and I have enough to get me there, but then I've got to charge it. And it's so until the charging infrastructure is better, it's definitely a big hurdle.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so Carrie, we were just looking at the electrified bus transit system. Outcome being cost savings on fuel and maintenance. We're looking at impacts. Can you think of anything we should add to this?
It's on slide 35.
Oh, yeah, we're on slide 35.
I don't immediately think of anything that isn't already on here.
I think the improved air quality is, we need to connect those, right, Wendy?
Yeah, sorry.
Okay.
I'm bad with the arrows. I'm good at filling in boxes. I'm getting bad at moving around
Yeah.
arrows.
We've done this so much this
I want to
week.
just draw it with a pencil.
And the maintenance training requirement is coming off of this one, right?
Yeah, I think that's I guess with buses and cars, right? I think Calvin just.
Yes, ma'am. With buses and cars, correct.
Yeah, so that's either of them.
Right. When we transitioned to CNG, our mechanics had to start from scratch on the CNG protocols and how do you work on a CNG bus and engine, and that required training. And we would have to do the same thing with electrification.
You know what? Once you said that, I just thought of something else, Wendy.
What's that?
It is just like with her GRTC buses, they had to upgrade their facility also. So with the storing of these batteries, currently we had to upgrade our facility to store batteries.
Oh,
So
that is a great point. I hadn't thought about that storage issue.
Yeah, so we had to change or do a facility upgrade to store. And I'm sure she'd do the same thing, for, her RTC buses to be able to come in the shop.
Okay. All right. So I noticed on your teleworking one, you had negative health benefits. Why was that? Is it due to like loneliness or depression from working from home?
Oh, mental health too. I think we were talking about sedentary lifestyles.
Oh, okay. Gotcha.
It does, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Let's see.
So route planning comes off of.
I still don't see David back. Did the thing not automatically send them back? Because I think our hours definitely have passed.
Let's see if yeah, it doesn't let me close the rooms for some weird reason. Oh, let me try. See if I can pull them back. All right, well, so thank you, everybody. Appreciate all of your this brain trust. It's very impressive. I think they're coming back now. It says it's closing. Want to get your reflections though. What are your thoughts on that exercise? What are your takeaways? How did it go?
This is Diane. I think what's going to be really important for you guys is to make it all consistent and understandable. Because in the one we had on resilient maintenance, we got stuck understanding what that meant. And so we have to make sure that if we don't understand it, then other people won't understand it. So.
Great.
So it was a good exercise to go through because that made it even clearer to us that we it needs to be better defined.
Yep. Was it on this one, the resilience maintenance plan?
Yep.
Yeah, I think this, for me, it was like we worked so hard to make sure that the strategy included all the elements we wanted it to include. And now when you pull it apart and kind of walk backwards, it's like, wait a minute, what is this saying?
Yeah.
Right.
So thank you. Yeah, that's where we are too. There's a lot of work to do to kind of pull this together, but I think we have a couple of ideas. One is to take all of this, and it really is starting the structure. First of all, obviously revise any last minute tweaks. So if you have suggestions on the language of the strategy, please go back in and put it in the comments of the slide itself or email us. We are finalizing that updated language. And then I think some of it though still can be better developed when we get to the implementation and the next steps. That's where we'll be able to get a little clearer on some of the elements that might be missing. But I think between the outputs and the outcomes and the impacts, we've got a nice framework for getting us in the right direction. So really appreciate this this beautiful brain trust. So with that, is there any other feedback that anyone would like to share? Looks like everyone did a great job. Our next meeting is going to be July 15th at 1 p.m. And that's where we'll just get a little deeper into the implementation and accountability framework. There's a survey link so we can hear what you had to say about this. If you have any thoughts for how to do this different or better, or if you just have some questions that you would like us to answer, feel free to add your comments to the survey. Yesterday in the email that I sent as a reminder for this meeting, there were a number of comments and questions from the last round of working groups, and so staff responded to those in that email. And I think it's interesting feedback for everyone to read about engagement and demographics and what we're doing with the unprioritized strategies and what we're doing with the feedback and things like that. So take a look at that. Otherwise, I'm done. If you guys have any updates or want to share about any upcoming events or resources, either speak out loud or put it in the chat. And I'll stay on for a few minutes if anyone wants to stick around and talk to us. Otherwise, enjoy the rest of this beautiful day and have a lovely weekend.
Thanks, you too.
You too. Bye.
Okay.
Bye.